Hello, good morning. This is BBC News. I'm Annita McVeigh, live in Downing Street as Liz Truss prepares to take office as the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. This morning, Boris Johnson has given his farewell speech outside Number 10 and left Downing Street.
Above all, thanks to you, the British people, to the voters for giving me the chance to serve, all of you who worked so tirelessly together to beat COVID, to put us where we are today.
He's on his way to Balmoral to formally stand down as Prime Minister in an audience with the Queen. Soon after, Liz Truss will arrive and Her Majesty will invite her to form a government. Liz Truss will be the 56th UK Prime Minister and the third woman in Number 10. She's promised to tackle the energy bill crisis in her first few days in office. Her plan, to be revealed on Thursday, is likely to include a freeze in bills. And in other news today, Canadian police say one of the two men charged in connection with 10 fatal stabbings has been found dead. The other is still on the run. Hello, good morning and welcome from Downing Street, where later today Liz Truss will enter that famous door at Number 10 as the country's new Prime Minister following her election yesterday as leader of the Conservative Party. The man she'll take over from, Boris Johnson, is now on his way to Balmoral to meet the Queen and formally resign from office. Earlier this morning here in Downing Street, he delivered his farewell speech, extolling his own record as Prime Minister and calling on the Conservative Party to get behind his successor. Let's have a listen to what he said.
Thank you. Well, this is it, folks. Thank you, everybody, for coming out so early this morning. In only a couple of hours, I will be in Balmoral to see Her Majesty the Queen. And the torch will finally be passed to a new Conservative leader. The baton will be handed over in what has unexpectedly turned out to be a relay race. They changed the rules halfway through, but never mind that now. And through that lacquered black door, a new Prime Minister will shortly go to meet a fantastic group of public servants. The people who got Brexit done, the people who delivered the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe, and never forget, 70% of the entire population got a dose within 6 months, faster than any comparable country. That is government for you. That's this Conservative government. People who organised those prompt early supplies of weapons to the heroic Ukrainian armed forces, an action that may very well have helped change the course of the biggest European war for 80 years. And because of the speed and urgency of what you did, everybody involved in this government, to get this economy moving again from July last year, in spite of all the opposition, all the naysayers, we have and will continue to have that economic strength to give people the cash they need to get through this energy crisis that has been caused by Putin's vicious war. And I know that Liz Truss and this compassionate Conservative government will do everything we can to get people through this crisis, and this country will endure it, and we will win. And if Putin thinks that he can succeed by blackmailing or bullying the British people, then he is utterly deluded. And the reason we will have those funds now and in the future is because we Conservatives understand the vital symmetry between government action and free market, capitalist, private sector enterprise. We're delivering on those huge manifesto commitments, making streets safer, neighbourhood crime down 38% in the last 3 years, 13,790 more police on the streets, building more hospitals, and yes, we will have 50,000 more nurses by the end of the decade, and 40 more hospitals by the end of 50,000 nurses by the end of this Parliament, I should say. 40 new hospitals by the end of the decade. Putting record funding into our schools and into teachers' pay, giving everybody over 18 a lifetime skills guarantee so they can keep upskilling throughout their lives. 3 new high-speed rail lines, 3, including Northern Powerhouse Rail. Colossal road programs from the Pennines to Cornwall. The rollout of gigabit broadband up over the last 3 years, I am proud to say, since you were kind enough to elect me, from 7% of our country's premises having gigabit broadband to 70% today. And we are, of course, providing the short and the long-term solutions for our energy needs, and not just using more of our own domestic hydrocarbons, but going up by 2030 to 50 gigawatts of wind power. That is half this country's electricity needs from offshore wind alone. A new nuclear reactor every year. And looking at what is happening in this country, the changes that are taking place, that is why private sector investment is flooding in. More private sector, more venture capital investment than China itself. More billion-pound tech companies sprouting here in the UK than in France, Germany, and Israel combined. And as a result, unemployment, as I leave office, unemployment down to lows not seen since I was about 10 years old and bouncing around on a space hopper, my friends. And on the subject of bouncing around in future careers, let me say that I am now like one of those booster rockets that has fulfilled its function, and I will now be gently re-entering the atmosphere and splashing down invisibly in some remote and obscure corner of the Pacific. And like Cincinnatus, I am returning to my plough. And I will be offering this government nothing but the most fervent support. I'll tell you why, this is a tough time for the economy. This is a tough time for families up and down the country. We can and we will get through it, and we will come out stronger the other side. But I say to my fellow Conservatives, it's time for politics to be over, folks. It's time for us all to get behind Liz Truss and her team and her programme and deliver for the people of this country. Because that is what the people of this country want, that's what they need, and that's what they deserve. I'm proud to have discharged the promises I made to my party when you were kind enough to choose me. Winning the biggest majority since 1987, the biggest share of the vote since 1979. Delivering Brexit, delivering our manifesto commitments, including, by the way, including social care, reforming social care, helping people up and down the country, ensuring that Britain is once again standing tall in the world. Speaking with clarity and authority from Ukraine to the AUKUS pact with America and Australia. Because we are one whole and entire united kingdom whose diplomats, security services and armed forces are so globally admired. And by the way, as I leave, I believe our union is so strong that those who want to break it up, they'll keep trying, but they will never, ever succeed. Thank you to everybody behind me in this building. Thank you to all of you in government. Thank you to everybody who's helped look after me and my family over the last 3 years, including Dylan, the dog. And I just say to my party, if Dylan and Larry can put behind them their occasional difficulties, then so can the Conservative Party. Above all, thanks to you, the British people, to the voters for giving me the chance to serve, all of you who worked so tirelessly together to beat COVID, to put us where we are today. Together, we have laid foundations that will stand the test of time, whether by taking back control of our laws or putting in vital new infrastructure. Great, solid masonry on which we will continue to build together, paving the path of prosperity now and for future generations. And I will be supporting Liz Truss and the new government every step of the way. Thank you all very much. Thank you and goodbye. Thank you.
Boris Johnson, still for the moment officially Prime Minister, delivering his farewell speech at 7:30 this morning. So what happens next? Well, Boris Johnson is currently on his way to Balmoral, where he will meet the Queen and formally resign as Prime Minister. Liz Truss will then make her way there too, and the Queen will ask her to form a government. After that, she'll return here to Downing Street and is expected to deliver her first speech as Prime Minister later this afternoon. And she's then expected to start appointing her cabinet ahead of her first Prime Minister's questions in the House of Commons tomorrow. And I think we can just show you some pictures now of Liz Truss's convoy actually arriving at RAF Northolt. Boris Johnson left from there earlier to make his way to Scotland. Liz Truss shortly we're about to do the same for that formal handover of power. That's her convoy just arriving at RAF Northolt a little earlier. All part of the process and protocol when one new Prime Minister takes over from another. And joining me now is our chief political correspondent, Nick Eardley, to talk through all of this. So let's have a word, first of all, Nick, morning to you, about that speech from Boris Johnson. What did you make of it?
Well, look, three things stood out for me. One, that Boris Johnson is still a bit bitter about how he was brought down. He talked about his party changing the rules halfway through the game. He tried to play down the idea of a comeback, saying that he was like a booster rocket that had fulfilled its duty. Although he did make that reference to a Roman emperor who, according to people who understand these things far more than me, left for a while politics, but then came back. So that's raised a few eyebrows. But also saying, look, the economic situation is really serious, and it's now time for his party to reunite behind Liz Truss. We've covered for months now, haven't we? For years now, the splits in the Conservative Party. So that kind of message from Boris Johnson was move on from me and get on to supporting the new Prime Minister. Will that be easy? I think Liz Truss will get the benefit of the doubt from most Tory MPs for the next few weeks. They'll be looking to her plans, they'll be looking to how she governs in action, to the cabinet she puts together later this afternoon and into tomorrow. But there are some deep divisions in the Conservative Party, and they won't be easy to gloss over.
We'll come back to that in a moment, but let's talk a little bit more then about what's first for Liz Truss once she formally becomes Prime Minister. She talked in her acceptance speech yesterday after becoming leader of the Conservative Party about delivery. That word was used a lot, wasn't it? And clearly at the top of most people's minds is delivery on dealing with the energy crisis and energy bills. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, that is the issue that is going to dominate the first few months of her premiership. Now, I think we will get a lot of talk about the cost of living when she arrives here later this afternoon to make her first speech as Prime Minister. And later this week, we are going to get her full plan to help millions of households and businesses with the cost of living crisis. Now, my expectation it will be in some form or another a price freeze, which will involve the government probably giving loans to energy, underwriting loans to energy companies to allow them to keep the price relatively similar to what it is at the moment for the next while. That is a big intervention from the government. It potentially could cost tens of billions of pounds. It is going to be a symbol, I think, for Liz Truss that she's prepared to make these big decisions when she wants. But there is also this interesting contrast that she pitched herself to her party as a low-tax Tory. She is going to deliver lower taxes, we're told, but also as a smaller state Tory. And actually one of the first things she's going to do in power is make a really big state intervention in the energy market. And interestingly, chatting to...
Contradictions.
Well, look, chatting to Tory MPs over the last 24 hours, there are some who don't think that the payments need to be universal. There are some who are a bit worried about the amount of money that could be involved. And I don't think it's necessarily going to win over opposition parties either, because they say you need to fund this with a windfall tax on the oil and gas companies who are making record profits. Liz Truss and the man who's probably going to move into number 11, Kwasi Kwarteng, as Chancellor, they're totally against that.
Yeah, what have Labour said this morning?
Well, look, I mean, they have said that they're not necessarily on board with the Liz Truss price freeze plan. They're waiting for the full details, as are we all. But have a listen to Labour's Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner. She was talking about Boris Johnson's speech in Downing Street.
Well, people are absolutely petrified about the energy bills that are coming their way. Businesses are as well, and we've needed an answer to this, and it's urgent that Liz Truss deals with this immediately. We've said there should be an energy freeze. We've also said that we should pay for that by a windfall tax on the gas and energy companies, oil companies that have made huge profits. Liz Truss has not said that, and the concern is how we pay for that when national debt is going up, and the people that are working hard in this country seem to be paying the most, and that doesn't seem to be any different under Liz Truss, who has of course been part of Boris Johnson's cabinet for the last number of years. We can't just keep blundering from one crisis to the next. We've got to have long-term solutions, and Labour have those solutions and have put forward those plans. I haven't seen any of that from the government, including this new Prime Minister. Well, I look at the last couple of weeks where we've seen Boris Johnson going around having his holidays, enjoying himself, when the rest of the country have been absolutely petrified. I've got businesses locally who have been there since pre-war who are now saying that they will not be able to survive. We've got households that are struggling. To be honest, most people in this country at the moment are looking at that and thinking, so what? What are you going to do to help the people of this country? You know, they're really struggling at the moment. So, yeah, it's great that all his mates are there to see him off and it's all buzzing there, but the rest of the country isn't buzzing. The rest of the country is looking at backlog Britain. They're seeing that things are taking longer for them to get things done. The public services are collapsing at the moment. The NHS is struggling. You know, trying to get your passport, trying to get your driving licence. All of the government departments are really struggling at the moment because, quite frankly, the government have done nothing to support them over the summer, and over the last couple of years they've been distracted by sleaze and by scandal, and so therefore it's great that we've got a woman Prime Minister, but what we really want to see is action to support people of this country.
Angela Rayner, and of course Labour will get their first opportunity to question the new Prime Minister Liz Truss at PMQs tomorrow lunchtime. Nick Eardley, our chief political correspondent, still with me here. So you mentioned that subject of unity earlier. How is she going to unify the Conservative Party? Boris Johnson in his speech urged the Conservative Party to get behind her, to rally behind her, didn't he? So let's have a look at the appointments she's going to make to her cabinet. What will that tell us about Liz Truss and about her plans?
Well, look, we know a few of the names who are going to be at the top of that cabinet. Kwasi Kwarteng will be moving into number 11 as Chancellor. Suella Braverman will be the new Home Secretary. James Cleverly will be the new Foreign Secretary. But looking at a lot of the names who are in the mix for the other cabinet jobs, a lot of them are Truss loyalists, people who have backed Liz Truss over the last few weeks in the leadership contest. I do think that's raising some concern within certain parts of the Conservative Party. Speaking to Tory MPs, a lot of them are urging unity. They're urging her to kind of bring different parts of the party around the cabinet table to show that she wants to govern for the whole party. It's interesting when you look at the result from yesterday. Yes, it was a comfortable victory for Liz Truss, but the percentage she got of the Conservative membership vote was the lowest percentage since 2001, when Tory members were given the final say over who their leader is. And speaking to some Conservative MPs, I think they are slightly worried that Liz Truss might repeat what they see as a mistake that Boris Johnson made, where he put people around the cabinet table who largely agreed with him. There weren't very many people challenging him in cabinet until the very end. And some are concerned that that might mean Ms Truss has a cabinet that agrees with her rather than make sure she's doing the right thing.
OK, on that point, Nick, for the moment, thank you very much. Nick Eardley, our chief political correspondent. Well, let's speak now to Annita McVeigh, who's a former special advisor to the Cabinet Office. Annita, morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us today on BBC News. And I'd like to begin by asking you to compare the conditions and the context, if you like, in which Boris Johnson entered number 10 with the conditions now as Liz Truss prepares to enter number 10 as Prime Minister. Very different backdrops.
Absolutely, and I think if we'd have to go back several years, perhaps even generations, to find a more difficult in-tray. When we look at what Liz Truss is facing, we're facing pressure on the NHS, just like Boris Johnson had to deal with, but also financial crisis like David Cameron had to deal with, and also, industrial strife and threats of inflation like Thatcher had to deal with, and not to mention an unruly party like Major had to deal with. I mean, her in-tray is bursting full of problems, and she really has a very short period of time to deal with the energy crisis and get the confidence of the public and the parliamentary party, as well as setting the party on track for victory in 2024.
Yeah, obviously her handling of the economy and the wider cost of living crisis is going to be absolutely crucial. We've heard of this idea. It seems that she may be asking the energy companies to freeze prices, underwriting loans to them effectively. But, how is that going to be paid for? Also this idea of trickle-down economics, growing the economy at the same time as cutting taxes. All of those. I mean, do you think she's going to be able to fulfill all of those plans in the current conditions?
I think that Liz Truss is nothing if not completely determined and committed to her vision. I think those that are expecting Truss to demur or to, think again about some of her bolder economic perspectives will find themselves disappointed, because I really think that she is committed to setting the country on a different path, and that is towards a sort of relentless target of growth, to allowing a bit more fiscal loosening, because she thinks that's really important for now, and giving herself that level of flexibility that she hopes will ensure there's enough confidence for the economy to recover more rapidly.
If she doesn't put political opponents within the party in some of those more senior positions in government, those challenging voices that Nick was talking about just a minute ago, what do you think that says about her?
It's a very interesting question. I guess my read is that I'm not sure that it is similar to the Johnson cabinet from the names that we hear and that I'm hearing in private so far. I think it's quite a lot of an emphasis on delivery, on people that she thinks can get a lot done in a very short period of time. And I would also say that, Liz Truss is a very known quantity in Westminster, not in the country, but in Westminster. And I think that those MPs that backed her are ones that she has had a good working relationship with. So I think it's a little bit more than just sort of you backed me in this contest and therefore you're going to get posts. And I think we will also see, not just in cabinet but also in those junior ranks, a lot of people who have backed other candidates getting some good and chunky roles.
OK, Annita, really good to talk to you. Annita Boateng, there, former special advisor to the Cabinet Office. Always really, really fascinating, isn't it, to look at the personalities and those working relationships between the Prime Minister and his or her cabinet. Well, the outgoing Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, is on his way now to Balmoral to officially tender his resignation to the Queen. And then, as we were explaining a little later, Liz Truss will be travelling to Balmoral also, where she will be invited by the Queen to form a government and become the 15th Prime Minister of the Queen's reign. Well, let's talk to our royal correspondent, Nicholas Witchell, who's at Balmoral. Nick, a word on the Queen, first of all. Extraordinary, isn't it, to think that this is going to be the 15th Prime Minister of her reign, but also a real break with tradition here, because normally she speaks to the outgoing Prime Minister and greets the incoming Prime Minister at Buckingham Palace.
Yes, indeed. Normally all of this would happen at Buckingham Palace. That is where she has appointed all of her previous Prime Ministers. Liz Truss, as you say, will become the 15th of the 70 years of her reign. And the reason, of course, as we know that it is happening here at Balmoral is because of her mobility issues, those same issues which prevented her from attending some of the events during the Jubilee weekend. And it was felt that it would be much more sensible for her to remain here at Balmoral and for the Prime Ministers, both the outgoing and the incoming, to make the journey up to Balmoral to see her. And that will, of course, happen in a couple of hours' time. As you've said, and as we've seen, Boris Johnson is on his way in that RAF jet. Now, it's generally about a 90-minute flight, certainly if it's a commercial aircraft, about a 90-minute flight to Aberdeen Airport. And then, as we understand it, both of them will be coming by road, separately in separate vehicles. And that's a 45-mile journey along quite a winding road, the A93 for most of it. So we would expect to see Boris Johnson arriving here, all being well, at just before 11:30 this morning. Then he will go in, and as we've been describing, he will have probably quite a short audience, official audience with the Queen, at which he will tender his resignation. Then, as normally happens, he will be joined by his wife Carrie, and they will have an informal conversation with the Queen before they then depart. They depart in private. And then shortly after midday, we would expect Liz Truss to arrive, she having made the same journey, though not, as we understand it, by an RAF aircraft. and then brought by road to Balmoral from Aberdeen. She will go in and have an audience of the Queen, and the Queen will invite her to form a government on the basis that she, of course, is now the leader of the largest party in the House of Commons, and that is the moment at which she becomes Prime Minister. Now, the whole procedure has this rather quaint historical name of kissing hands, but there is no kissing. There would be just a handshake, and that will be the moment at which Liz Truss becomes Prime Minister. And she, too, we would imagine, would have brought her husband, Hugh O'Leary, with her. And once the formal business of the audience is over, generally, a new Prime Minister is then joined by their husband or their wife, and they have a conversation with the Queen before then departing. And clearly she will want to get back to London as soon as possible in order to begin the serious business of putting together her cabinet and starting her government.
Nick, for the moment, thank you very much. Nick Witchell, our royal correspondent there at Balmoral. We'll keep a close eye on developments there. A little later, as Nick was explaining, as Liz Truss then formally and officially becomes Prime Minister before heading back here to Downing Street. Certainly no honeymoon period, no time to ease herself into office, a bulging in tray, many crucial and pressing issues to deal with. Right at the top of that, of course, the energy crisis, the energy bill crisis, that cost of living crisis. Throughout the summer, throughout the leadership campaign, she's hinted, hasn't she, about what she's going to do. She says she's got plans, that she has goals that she is going to achieve. Delivery, she talked about yesterday in her acceptance speech once she was elected as leader of the Conservative Party. So after all those hints and promises, it is time for her to actually make the big reveal, I suppose we could say. She's hinted that she's had lots of ideas, lots of discussions about how best to tackle the cost of living crisis. Now it's time for the big reveal. What are those plans? Are they going to help people with their energy bills, with the crippling debts that many of them are incurring as a result of the soaring price of energy? So as we look now at these images coming live to us from RAF Northolt, this is the plane carrying Liz Truss on her way to Balmoral, to the Queen's residence there, where she will formally become the Prime Minister of the UK. Of course, many of you will have seen the clip of her as a much younger politician when she was a member of the Liberal Democrats, expressing anti-monarchist views. But today she is going to meet the Queen, and that very ancient tradition whereby the outgoing Prime Minister tenders his resignation, in this case Boris Johnson, his resignation, and the incoming Prime Minister is asked to form Her Majesty's government. Okay, we will be keeping you right up to date throughout the day on all the developments here at BBC News. Right now, it's back to Joanna in the studio. Joanna.
Thank you very much, Anita. And as we're hearing, today is a day of ceremony, but as soon as that is over, Liz Truss will need to get to work at Downing Street with a lot on the agenda, as we've been talking about. She needs to obviously focus on setting up her new cabinet, and many policy issues are going to be jostling for her attention. Energy is going to be the key issue this week, but also the Ukraine has obviously formed a very important part of Boris Johnson's outgoing administration, and it's going to continue to be an issue for Liz Truss, with the UK having been one of the Ukraine's most stalwart backers since Russia's invasion 6 months ago, with President Zelensky and Boris Johnson enjoying a close relationship. So what could Liz Truss now mean for the war in Ukraine? Let's go to our correspondent in Kyiv, Hugo Bachega. So Hugo, as I mentioned, a very close relationship between Boris Johnson and Volodymyr Zelensky, and now he is out and a new Prime Minister's coming in. What will that mean?
Yeah, Joanna, and Boris Johnson is an extremely popular figure here in Ukraine because of this immense support being provided by the UK in terms of military support, but also in terms of this diplomatic support. Boris Johnson has been very strong in his statements, talking about the need to defeat President Putin. This morning, as he left Downing Street, he talked about the need to keep supporting Ukraine, saying that President Putin's blackmail will not succeed, perhaps talking about energy and gas. And President Zelensky last night in his address devoted great part of his nightly address to talk about the change in leadership, and he referred to Boris Johnson as being a friend. Obviously, Boris Johnson, came here 3 times since the beginning of the war. 10 days ago, he was here on Independence Day, and alongside President Zelensky, again urged European countries to endure this cost of living crisis, to defeat Russia in this country. But President Zelensky also talked about Liz Truss and said Ukrainians know Liz Truss really well. She's always been on the bright side of European politics, in the words of the president. And he said he believed that together we'll be able to protect our nations and to defeat Russia's destructive efforts. So it's something that's been watched very closely here, but I don't think that people here believe or think that any kind of change is going to happen as a result of Liz Truss being the new Prime Minister.
As we talk to you, Hugo, we're just watching the plane carrying Liz Truss from London up to Balmoral, just taxiing on the runway at Northolt as they prepare to take off. In terms of the situation on the ground in Ukraine, what is the latest on Zaporizhzhia, which is, of course, the focus of so much concern?
Yeah, so yesterday the Ukrainians said that they had to disconnect the reactor at the Zaporizhzhia plant, the only reactor still connected to the grid. And that's because they had to switch off the only functioning transmission line. That happened because of a fire that the Ukrainians say was caused by Russian shelling, and they had to disconnect this transmission line. This line wasn't damaged itself, but they say that they had to switch it off to try to extinguish this fire. But I think what it shows is that, the situation remains tense around this nuclear facility. And later today, Rafael Grossi, who is the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, he was here last week. He visited the Zaporizhzhia station. He will be releasing his report about the situation here in Ukraine. He will be talking about the situation at the nuclear facility. And I think there was the hope that with the international inspectors who remain at the Zaporizhzhia complex, 2 monitors are now based at the nuclear power station. There was the hope that this could lead to a de-escalation of crisis, but it seems that the situation remains very complicated, very tense, with the claims and counterclaims from both Russia and Ukraine.
Thank you, Hugo. Well, we're watching the situation live at Northolt, where Liz Truss is on a plane. She is going to be heading up for Balmoral. Boris Johnson, the outgoing Prime Minister, left a little before her on a separate plane. That is for security reasons. This is actually Boris Johnson's plane now just arriving at Aberdeen Airport. So the choreography is that he, of course, goes first of all to Balmoral, where he will meet the Queen. He will go in front of the cameras, scheduled to arrive at Balmoral at 11:20 at that door, to be led inside to have that outgoing conversation with the Queen. And then a little bit later, 12:10, Liz Truss is due to arrive, and she's due to spend about half an hour with the Queen. And of course, after that, she leaves as Prime Minister, and then at that point she will be leaving on the official plane to head back and get down to work. Boris Johnson goes in front of the cameras, and he leaves off camera as a backbencher. So we heard from him this morning at 7:30 as he left Number 10, giving a speech on the steps of Downing Street. We're expecting to hear from Liz Truss on the steps of Number 10 at around 4 o'clock, although the weather is not predicted to be great, so it may be that doesn't happen outside, that happens inside. But it's a day of choreography, and we just see that plane, as I mentioned, just bringing Boris Johnson. Oh no, now we're back to Northolt. So we're back to Northolt. This is the flight that will take Liz Truss up to Balmoral. So the shuttle going on here as they take separate flights for security reasons. OK, we'll keep you updated on all of that. Right now, let's catch up with the sport. We can get the latest from John. Hello.
Joanna, many thanks indeed. Good morning. Hello, everyone. There will be a first-time Grand Slam winner at the men's US Open this year after Rafa Nadal was knocked out in the 4th round. And he said afterwards he wasn't sure when he'll play again.
When the competition started, my level went down. You know, that's the truth. For some reason, I don't know, mental issues in terms of a lot of things happened the last couple of months, maybe, but doesn't matter. At the end, the only thing that happened is we went to the 4th round of the US Open, and I faced a player that was better than me.
From matters at Flushing Meadows, what a year it's already been for Welsh football. The men's side heading to their first World Cup in 64 years. Now the women's team have a chance tonight to move into the playoffs of World Cup qualifying 2, a match against Slovenia to come, which is being called the biggest in their history. Wales have never qualified for a major tournament and will see a record attendance at the Cardiff City Stadium. Nearly 12,000 fans, that's more than double their previous record. And all they need is a draw, just a point, to get to the next stage after beating Greece last Friday.
The belief that I have, the staff have in the team, is something that we've had from day one. So Game 10 doesn't excite me any more than any of the others did, because we do very much focus on what we need to do to perform, and that's really important to us. So I'm happy to, I'm happy that if the fans think that, then they can get excited around that. But I'm very much focused on what I want this team to do, and it's to do the best they can so that we can qualify for tournaments consistently, because that's what we need to do.
Yes, huge excitement and anticipation ahead of that match. Scotland are already sure of their playoff place. They play the Faroe Islands. Northern Ireland go to Latvia, while England are back on home soil for the first time since beating Germany to win the European Championships in the summer. What an occasion it'll be in front of a sellout crowd of 30,000 at Stoke City Stadium, with World Cup qualification already secure. They take on Luxembourg, who, it's worth pointing out, England beat 10-0 last time. The Champions League returns tonight. Celtic opening up their campaign with the visit of 14-time winners Real Madrid. Confidence, though, high in the Celtic camp after the weekend victory in the Old Firm derby. But the boss knows his side will certainly relish the challenge of facing the defending champions and one of European football's all-time greats. Manchester City, meanwhile, are in Spain to face Seville. Despite dominating domestically, the Champions League trophy still remains elusive for Pep Guardiola's side. But could the addition of Erling Haaland be the missing piece of the jigsaw this season?
Hopefully he can help us, of course it is. But he's not going to win just for Erling, not going to win just for Erling. This is my feeling. So, but they have a special quality, and maybe in the important games, and he can solve maybe the problems that we have. Yeah, definitely. But if we don't play good, we are not going to win the games in the Champions League or even the Premier League.
Well, he certainly made a fast start, and Chelsea will hope Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang does too. He's in line to make his debut for the club after his close to £10.5 million move from Barcelona. The 33-year-old striker will be playing in a mask against Dinamo Zagreb in their opening Group E game tonight after suffering a jaw injury during a robbery at his home last week. And that is all the sport for now. I'll hand you back to Annita at Downing Street.
John, thank you very much. And let's take you straight to some pictures from Aberdeen Airport. I hope we can show you the Prime Minister, I think, he's just got off the plane in the last few seconds and got into that convoy of vehicles and is on his way to Balmoral to formally tender his resignation as Prime Minister to the Queen. This is the first time in the Queen's reign that this process of handing over between Prime Ministers has happened away from Buckingham Palace. We're told because of the Queen's mobility issues and because of wanting certainty around her diary that the decision was taken quite a few days ago now to have Boris Johnson and, as we now know, Liz Truss travel to Scotland for this ceremony, rather than the Queen travel to London. So that's Boris Johnson on his way to Balmoral, and meanwhile Liz Truss, her plane took off from RAF Northolt a short while ago. So we think there'll be about an hour in between Boris Johnson seeing the Queen and then Liz Truss greeting the Queen, where she will be asked to form a government, and then she will come back here to Downing Street, where we are, later on today. We're expecting her to say something, if the weather holds, we think. Rain, lots of rain forecast, but you never know. She might get lucky and have a dry spell, to stand in front of the lectern, as Boris Johnson did a little earlier, to address the nation, and then she'll get on with the job. First and foremost, of course, appointing her cabinet. We already know some of the positions have been filled, but she has got a bulging in tray. A lot of work to get on with. No honeymoon period, a very, very different context and environment to when Boris Johnson took over the reins at number 10. So let's take a look at what the biggest issues for the new Prime Minister will be, according to the public. Joining me now are two senior figures from polling organisations, Patrick English, Associate Director at YouGov, and Damien Lyons-Lowe, who is the Chief Executive at Survation. Welcome to both of you. I just want to ask you, first of all, what the public think of Liz Truss and how she compares to Boris Johnson as well. Patrick, what does your polling say?
Yes, so our polling suggests that the public don't have a particularly fantastic view of Liz Truss at this early stage. She isn't quite as famous among the public as Boris Johnson, so she does have room to grow. But certainly at this sort of early position, the public aren't likely to think that Liz Truss is going to make a better Prime Minister than Boris Johnson. Also, they don't think she's going to make a better Prime Minister. In fact, they think she'll make a worse Prime Minister than every other Prime Minister we've had since and including Margaret Thatcher. So her early position isn't so great with the public.
What about amongst the Conservative Party, Damien?
So one of the key problems that Liz Truss has is that, as Patrick was just saying, amongst Conservative Party voters, if you ask the question about who would make the best Prime Minister, 37% of Conservative voters would say Boris Johnson, 28% would have said Rishi Sunak, and just 21% would have said Liz Truss. So there's a kind of an interesting situation where supporters of the Conservative Party, there is a little bit of regret for the departure of Boris Johnson. And as Patrick was saying, there's a low expectation for how Liz will do in a role of Prime Minister. And when we conducted a test on that last week, we asked standard voting intention, where we have a Labour lead over the Conservatives of 10 points. And when we then named the party leaders, including Liz Truss for the Conservatives and Keir Starmer for Labour, etc., that 10-point lead turned into a 17-point lead for the Labour Party. So expectations are very low, and some Conservative supporters are a little bit undecided about what a Liz Truss premiership looks like.
So both your polling suggests that she's facing headwinds, not only within the Conservative Party, but amongst the wider public. Damien, let me just stay with you for the moment, because you've done polling on different measures to help households during this cost of living crisis. What have you found?
So the number one issue, as you know, Patrick's polling and Survation's polling would indicate, is the cost of living crisis, and in particular, the energy crisis in terms of people's bills is coming top of people's minds. So the biggest task for Liz Truss this week is, most people would agree, is to tackle the problem of rising and accelerating energy bills for both consumers and businesses. So when we ask people, what measures would you support to solve that, Keir Starmer and the Liberal Democrats' policy of having a cap on energy prices is incredible.
Damien,
It's probably the most popular policy. 82% of public support that. Now, in terms of how that should be paid, the current rumours of the plans.
Damien, I'm going to interrupt you because we're having a few issues with your sound. We'll try and sort that out, and let me go to Patrick on this same subject. Of course, everybody wants to know what Liz Truss, after all the talk during the leadership election campaign, what she's actually going to do in delivering help to tackle the cost of living crisis, to deal with those soaring energy bills. So I think you've been looking also at what people think about what she might do and what Labour is talking about doing.
Yes, that's right. So what we're finding is that Labour have an advantage at the minute in terms of who the public think have a better plan for the cost of living between them and the Conservative Party. We find that policies such as freezing the current energy prices, increasing help for those on benefits and means tested benefits are very popular. They poll well with the majority of the public. Policies such as the ones that Liz Truss has been talking about, we're talking about their tax cuts and sort of, let's say, indirect measures such as that, they don't poll so well at all. So the public want action. They believe that what the previous administration has done is nowhere near enough. They're not convinced that the kind of policies that Liz Truss is talking about are going to help all that much, and they want to see much more action much faster. And I think, as many commentators have been saying, as Damien has been saying, that's going to be crucial to determining the first sort of 2-3 weeks of Liz Truss's premiership and how she will eventually go down with the public.
So are people trusting Labour more than the Conservatives at the moment to deal with this issue, or is there scepticism reflected in your polling about all politicians right now?
Yes, of course. So, as with many such questions, when we ask who would do better after Labour, Conservatives or Keir Starmer, Liz Truss, don't know or not sure does come out on top. However, between the two parties, between the two leaders, we can sort of see that Keir Starmer and Labour do have a slight advantage. And I think that's also being reflected in the vote intention polling as well. A 15-point lead for Labour is our current figure, and that reflects a lot of deep concern among the public for the cost of living crisis, for the economy, for health, for the environment as well, as something that we're picking up increasingly, taxes. And Labour seems to be hitting better notes with the public right now than the Conservatives. However, of course, it's not as if the public are looking at Labour's plans and endorsing them fully. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of work to do on both sides. But at the minute, Labour do have a bit of an advantage.
Just going back to Liz Truss herself, we talked a little earlier, didn't we, about polling, how she compares to Boris Johnson and so forth. In terms of what people think of her in more detail, what characteristics they perceive her to have, what does your polling say?
Yes, so it's the best thing that the British public have to say about Liz Truss is they kind of tend to think she's hard-working. About 40% of the public would agree that she's a grafter in that sense. However, a majority think that she is not very competent and she's out of touch with the public. So she doesn't have fantastic personal ratings either. There's not a real sense that Liz Truss is someone that's going to come in all guns blazing, who can connect with the public and solve the issues that's in front of them right now. And I think that is a reflection of some of the conversations we've been having earlier surrounding those policies around the cost of living. This is the number one crisis. This is the thing the public are continually telling us needs fixing, they're most concerned about. And they don't have faith right now that Liz Truss or the Conservative Party, and indeed the previous administration, have the right ideas to deal with it. So I think it'll be very interesting over the next week or so to see if Liz Truss, now that she can pivot toward the electorate rather than Conservative Party members, might start changing her tune and start offering some of the packages more similar to the Labour Party proposals that are polling quite well. And then we'll see how those go down with the public and whether her personal ratings improve.
OK, Patrick, thank you very much for that. Patrick English from YouGov. And also thanks to Damien Lyons from Survation. And apologies, we weren't able to re-establish that connection with Damien to get back to him. But thanks to him for his time as well. So as Patrick was just saying, it's going to be very interesting as we start to get a better look at Liz Truss, and as she starts to reveal, we assume, more of the plans that she's talked about during the leadership campaign and has promised that she will give us more detail on. It's going to be really interesting to see how the public react to that. Well, apart from the cost of living crisis, of course, there are many, many other issues that she will be dealing with as the new Prime Minister. Environmental issues are among those. Joining me now is Hugo Tagholm, who's Chief Executive of Surfers Against Sewage. Hugo, good to have you with us. And of course, sewage has definitely been in the news agenda recently, hasn't it, because of the pollution at a number of beaches. Now, when Liz Truss was Environment Secretary, during that time she oversaw what turned out to be millions of pounds worth of cuts in money that was supposed to be spent on dealing with pollution. So do you have hopes that as Prime Minister she might do something to help?
Well, look, as you say, as Environment Secretary, she slashed funding for environmental regulation, regulation that would have held water companies to account. We now see millions of hours of sewage pollution going into our rivers and coastlines. So where was the long-term thinking about the health of the environment? And that's what we're concerned about today, the climate issue. We hear moves to open up more oil and gas exploration in the North Sea. Of course, we've got the sewage pollution crisis, and we've got the biodiversity crisis. We've got industrial fishing fleets sailing through our marine protected areas and other damage to this precious environment. So we need to see more from Liz Truss. The new Prime Minister needs to put the environment front and centre to the restoration of the health of this country.
Are you optimistic that she will, or are you sceptical?
But look, clearly we need to give the new Prime Minister time, but this is an environmental emergency as well as a cost of living emergency. And the people that can afford to put money into this are the big energy companies making billions of pounds worth of profits, as are the water companies. And we need to see these big industries putting more into the economy and more into protecting people and planet. So we want to see from this Prime Minister more action and put us on a bigger footing to restore our environment and restore prosperity amongst people around the country.
So we've heard that Liz Truss isn't inclined to, extend windfall taxes because she believes that discourages investment by the big oil giants, the big oil and gas giants. But, if she's not taxing them more, do you want to see this government holding them to account in terms of making progress on environmental issues? And how are you going to establish whether that's happening?
Well, absolutely, we should be pushing. I mean, even opening up new oil fields and gas fields, this isn't going to solve the immediate cost of living crisis. We need to be insulating homes. We need to be doing things that can create a long-term sustainability for communities around the country and protect the environment simultaneously. And Surfers Against Sewage, alongside other brilliant charities, will be putting the pressure on to make sure this government truly is greener and truly is thinking about the ocean and other environments as part of new radical policy reforms.
OK, Hugo, thank you very much for your time. Hugo Tagholm there, Chief Executive of Surfers Against Sewage. Well, we have got many voices to talk to throughout the day from all sorts of walks of life. But for the moment, from Downing Street, we'll be back here very soon. But right now, it's back again to Joanna.
Thank you very much, Anita. Well, let's take a look at what is making headlines elsewhere. Police in Canada say one of the two men suspected of killing 10 people in a series of stabbings has been found dead. They've also revealed the two suspects were brothers, and they say the second is still at large and should be considered armed and dangerous. Although he's not been caught, police have already laid charges of murder and attempted murder. 18 people are known to have been wounded in the attacks. Azadeh Mashiri reports.
A manhunt is underway in Canada after two brothers were suspected of stabbing several people to death and injuring others in the province of Saskatchewan during a Labour Day weekend rampage. As the search continues, the police delivered a significant update. One of the brothers, Damien Sanderson, was found dead.
His body was located outdoors in a heavily grassed area in proximity to a house that was being examined. We can confirm he has visible injuries. These injuries are not believed to be self-inflicted at this point.
Authorities went on to warn that the other suspect, Miles Sanderson, is still at large and still a threat to the public.
Miles Sanderson, Damien's brother, may have sustained injuries. This has not been confirmed. But we do want the public to know this because there is a possibility he may seek medical attention.
First, police received reports of a stabbing in James Smith Cree Nation, an Indigenous community. But soon more reports came in of victims in the nearby town of Weldon.
This guy come walking up here and he had, it looked like his coat over his face. And he said, I need somebody to take me to the hospital. My mouth has been hurt. He said, I've been stabbed.
The suspects have now been charged with first-degree murder for one of the worst mass killings in Canada's history.
My thoughts and the thoughts of all Canadians are with those who've lost loved ones and with those who are injured. This kind of violence, or any kind of violence, has no place in our country.
As the manhunt extends into another day, officials have asked the community to stay alert for signs of the remaining suspect, as a state of emergency is declared in the province. Azadeh Mashiri, BBC News.
The Prime Minister of Pakistan, Shehbaz Sharif, has been visiting Sindh province, the area of the country hit hardest by the current devastating floods. This aerial view from the Prime Minister's plane showed vast areas covered with flood water. At least 1,300 people have died as a result of the floods, according to the country's National Disaster Management Agency, and millions more have been made homeless. Detectives investigating the fatal shooting of 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Cobell in Liverpool have been given another 36 hours to question 3 suspects. A 34-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of murder and attempted murder in the early hours of Sunday. 2 other men, aged 29 and 41, are also being held on suspicion of assisting an offender. Olivia was shot in her home 15 days ago as her mother tried to stop a gunman entering the family home. The Duchess of Sussex has given her first speech in the UK since she stepped down as a working royal. Speaking in Manchester at a global summit for young people, Meghan told the audience about her own struggle with self-belief. Prince Harry accompanied her to the event. It's their first visit to the UK since the Platinum Jubilee in early June. Right, let's catch up with the weather. Here's Matt.
Thank you very much, Joanna. Very good morning. Thought I'd just start with a few images from our weather watchers yesterday, both captured in Weymouth. This dramatic cloud, a shelf cloud, which is the forerunner to some pretty nasty thunderstorms that we saw yesterday. And once again today, we're going to see more in the way of showers and thunderstorms develop. Maybe not quite to the intensity some of you saw last night. In between, though, there will be some sunshine, a few spots staying completely dry, and for a fair few of you, the showers only form a very small part of the day. But yesterday's storms, well, last night, they particularly affected southern counties of England, East Anglia. They faded away. You can see the cloud, the rain that's associated with it. There's a slight line here. That's now bringing some wetter conditions towards Balmoral and parts of northeast Scotland. That'll develop further across other parts of northern Scotland as we go through today. Couldn't rule out some thunder with that. Some blustery conditions to the north of it, but bright in Orkney and Shetland. To the south of it, sunshine, but those showers develop more and more widely. The heaviest at the moment to the south and the west, but inland we could see some thunderstorms develop into the afternoon, including the London area as well. Winds strongest in the far north of Scotland and towards Wales and the southwest, getting close to gale force in 1 or 2 spots. Temperatures down a little bit on yesterday, but actually still warm enough out there today, quite humid. And when the sun shines out, it will certainly feel warm with temperatures in the high teens, low to mid-20s. Finish the day with some big storms across East Anglia and the southeast, not quite to the intensity of last night. They will clear away much quicker as well. A few showers continue through England and Wales. More persistent rain, though, will develop with some thunderstorms potentially across parts of central and northern Scotland. And once again tonight, not a cold night by any means. It's going to be another warm and humid one with temperatures 12 to around 15 Celsius to start tomorrow morning. So the reason for the dramatic conditions and the fairly turbulent weather at the moment is this area of low pressure, which is almost stuck to the southwest of us, but it creeps a little bit further eastwards across us as we go through Wednesday, and that's going to mean more showers more widely. They will see more persistent rain, though, northern Scotland to begin with, which will fade away, becoming confined to Orkney and then later Shetland. The showers very well scattered across the country. There will be some sunshine in between. Where you do see the showers, they will be on the heavy side, maybe even the odd rumble of thunder again. And temperatures down a degree or so in today's, but still warm in the sunshine. Starts to turn a bit cooler from Thursday onwards as our area of low pressure just nudges a bit further eastwards. Closest to it, you can just see them revolving round, are the heaviest of the showers through parts of England, Wales, southwest Scotland and Northern Ireland. Driest of all to parts of northwest Scotland, but as I said, temperatures starting to fall away a little. And our area of low pressure pushes its way eastwards, end of the week, turns cooler still, but the showers become less numerous. Bye for now.